Well, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. This was cutting it close. I sent a text to Creighton a little while ago and said you might have to start. Creighton, what was your reaction when I was like, I might not be there by 8 o'clock?
I think my exact reaction was, okay. Okay.
We were ready.
You guys, I knew you were ready. So I was at the ball field. Quincy had a game tonight. It was scheduled yesterday. So thanks for the heads up, the advance warning. So he had a game in Auburn from 6 to 8. So I had to leave a little early, but was trying to watch as much as I could to get here in time, and wasn't sure I was going to make it. So welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. So glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. They are glad that I am here as well. Although that would have been a fun, entertaining 10 minutes if it was you guys. What would you have done? What were you going to talk about?
We decided to talk about our mics and where we want to go,
like, hey,
where
man,
we're going to
sound
put
good?
them.
Does this look good? Am I good right here? Can you hear me?
Can you?
We good here?
Is it
Check
right
one,
here?
two.
If I have my mic way out here?
One, Creighton.
Oh, man, that would have been just a spellbinding 10 minutes of live stream for sure.
Quality content.
I think it would have been. I think what you should have done is you should have just pretended like go live, but as if you didn't realize you had gone live, and so it would be like 10 minutes of you guys just talking like you normally would. Although that could have been very dangerous.
That could have been. We probably just wouldn't talk about camping.
Probably just not that would not be a good idea. So anyway, what you are watching is the live stream recording of the Outlaw Radio Show. Outlaw Radio is a syndicated radio show broadcasted across America. We have wonderful radio partners literally in almost every state across the union. We record a radio show, 4 blocks of audio we record. We send those blocks of audio, those files, to His Productions, who is our partner. They produce the radio show. It ends up being 2 files for radio broadcasting. Once they're produced, ready to roll, uploaded to their server, we actually take those files back. We podcast them. We put them back together, podcasted as one entire episode of the Outlaw Radio Show. So if you're listening, if you listen on the radio, if you listen on the podcast, this is a pre-recorded show. You're watching the live stream, and it is live. So we are recording a radio show, which is fun because we can keep it very fresh, very current, 8 o'clock every Wednesday night. Creighton is kind of the man behind the live stream. And so if you're watching, whether it's on facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw or you're watching on our YouTube channel, if you are, I'd encourage you to subscribe. You can get to our YouTube channel, outlawradio.live. If you leave a comment in either YouTube or Facebook in the comment section, Creighton is kind of the man that's monitoring that, interacting with the audience. So if you have a question, a comment, some feedback, you can post something there. And between these blocks of audio, Creighton will kind of represent you. He's the gatekeeper. So if it's not any good, he's not going to bring it up. But if it is good, he'll introduce it to the show. And then Nick, we can go ahead and switch to the other camera. Creighton. Nick is kind of the resident audience member. Same with Derek. They're here to hang out, listen to the show, and then kind of react as maybe you would react if you were here with us. And so between the blocks of audio, those two guys are free to ask questions, build off of a point that was made. Nick is already tired. Apparently, we are already boring him.
My goodness.
So, fellas, you guys ready to do a radio show?
Let's run it.
Yeah,
ready.
man.
All right.
I was also ready to open a radio show.
Is my mic okay? Can you hear me?
All right. Let's do this. You guys ready? All right,
I'm ready.
Cue some music here. Get some music rolling. All right, first block audio is 14 minutes. 14 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. While there happens to be some very cool 316 verses in the Bible, we're called Calvary 316 mostly because we're located off of Highway 316, which wouldn't mean anything unless you're local. If that's you and you can relate to that, I encourage you to come be my guest one Sunday morning. Our service is at 10:30. If you're not local, but let's say you're looking for a church that you can attend digitally, we live stream our service. You can find our YouTube channel at calvary316.live. To learn more about the church, check out calvary316.tv. To access our teaching archive, visit c316.tv. I'm currently teaching through a series called Revelation of the King, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, an expositional study through the book of Revelation. You can also access all of the audio and video of that series by just going to calvary316.tv/Revelation of the King. I do hope wherever you're listening or however you're listening, whether you're listening on one of our wonderful radio partners, or maybe you're listening through our podcast. We podcast every episode of the Outlaw Radio Show on Apple, Google, Spotify. If you're listening on the radio and you can't stay with us over the whole hour, that's okay. You can go to the podcast and you can pick back up where you left off, or you can listen to maybe the part that you missed. So again, every episode is podcasted as well as sent out across the airwaves. I am joined, as always, by my partner in crime, my sidekick, Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
In addition to the radio, broadcasting on radio, in addition to the show being podcasted, how else can the listening audience consume Outlaw Radio?
My personal favorite, because you get to see my beautiful face, is the live stream, which we broadcast to both YouTube and Facebook every Wednesday night at 8.
So every Wednesday night at 8, if you're listening on the radio or the podcast, this is pre-recorded, but you can actually watch the live stream recording of the show. Again, you're not going to be able to watch necessarily this one that live because it's been pre-recorded,
but you could watch this one if you wanted to.
And explain how that kind of works, because we don't just live stream, but we also archive the video, correct?
Yeah, basically the live stream goes out, and YouTube and I believe Facebook both just have a backlog of all of our previous live streams. They just show up as like under this channel's video on our page on both of them.
It's been cool. We've been doing this. We've kind of experimented this summer, figuring out kind of the workflow by which we wanted to kind of launch kind of the next iteration of the Outlaw Radio Show, radio, podcast, and live stream, which is cool. And the advantage of live streaming is that we can actually interact with the listening audience. Again, the drawback, if you're listening on radio or the podcast, is throughout the course of an episode, you might have a thought or a question, and you might want to provide some feedback. Yes, you can go to outlawradio.org. You can find our contact information. You can submit a question. But if you watch the live stream of the Outlaw Radio Show and you have this thought that pops up, and the comment section of both our YouTube channel and the Facebook stream, you can leave a comment and interact. Creighton is actually, you're kind of behind all of that.
Yes. I would also say that the other advantage is that we can, when we do something that is very recent, you get to see it and listen to it as soon as it happens, as opposed to 3 weeks?
About 3 weeks or so with a delay. And that's always been kind of one of the struggles with, a show that seeks to deconstruct the negative perception of Christians by boldly talking about relevant topics in an honest and genuine way. Again, the show being cultural, political, religious, trying to hit the gamut on various topics. Did a whole episode on the Masters this fall. You never know what you're going to get on the Outlaw Radio Show, but again, it's nice to be able to talk about something in the moment that it's happening. It's hard to do that again with radio or even the podcast, but the live stream definitely enables us to do that. Regarding today's episode, and what I want to talk about, it really is inspired. It's built upon a conversation that I had this Monday night. So this Monday night, Monday. So as a pastor, and I pastor a church, Mondays can be rough. Mondays can be difficult days for a pastor. You're coming off of the high from Sunday morning. Your entire week builds up to that crescendo. And then Monday, they call it the Monday blues. Not only are you dealing with just getting back into the workflow, your typical Monday grind, but it's one of those things where just as a pastor, you're coming off of this, this spiritual high. Everything's been building to Sunday, and then you can just kind of enter a little bit of a blue, depressive type mentality when it comes to Monday. And this Monday, I'm just speaking truth, just being real. This Monday, I was just kind of a bit in the dumps. I was just feeling a little discouraged, a little depressed. 2020 was a very trying year. Everybody and regarding 2020 and COVID and the lockdowns and school, I don't want to just say that. I don't want to rant about my own issues, knowing that everyone listening has their own issues. But just to speak candidly, pastoring a small church through a pandemic, there was no manual to do it. There was no book. There was very few places you could go for any type of counsel or advice. 2020, Creighton, you were with me the whole way. It presented a lot of its own challenges and trials and tribulations.
Yeah, we had to figure out how live streaming worked for the first time. Like in 2 days, we had to be we have to go from having no live stream to now doing it full time
and trying to figure out how to do it well with a limited budget. And you're just wondering from week to week when you go back live, when you go back in-person services, just will people come back? When will people come back?
What do we need to do so that they feel safe to come back and so they don't feel awkward?
What do you do when someone who was at the service later in the week test positive for coronavirus? Again, there was no manual for this. So it was a roller coaster type of year. And I will say, kind of getting into 2021, there was a measure of, I think, anticipation that normalcy maybe was around the corner. And when you have Sundays where things aren't normal, where the people that haven't come back still haven't come back. Yes, there's a vaccine. Yes, good things are happening. Yes, it seems like the fog might be lifting, that blue skies are ahead. But you thought you got into 2021 and you thought that we're going to get back to normal quick. We finally get the vaccine. Joe Biden's now president, so it's all going to work out. And it hasn't. We're in March. It's a year. This has been going on for a year. And I just that Monday I had kind of a downer day. And so I reached out to a brother of mine, Joe, and I was like, man, what are you doing tonight? He goes, I'm cooking dinner. Got nothing going on after that. And I was like, you want to hang out? Like, I could use some Joe time. And I should say that if you don't have someone in your life that when you're feeling blue that you can't call up and just hang out with, you need to find that type of a person because that's what helps with the ebbs and flows of life. And so Joe came over and we were hanging out, chewing the fat. And it was uplifting. It uplifted my spirits. It was encouraging. And you guys, Creighton, I know you're friends with Joe. So, he's a jolly type of guy and spending time with him can be encouraging.
He is the opposite of the crotchety old man.
He's an old man, but he is
old. Yeah.
He is the opposite of the crotchety old man. He's more of the Barnabas, the older man in scripture that's filled with the Holy Spirit, that oozes the Holy Spirit. And
absolutely.
And it kind of rubs off. Anyway, I'm spinning my wheels here. So I'm hanging out with Joe. Wonderful conversation. He was like, hey, what are you doing for Outlaw Radio on Wednesday? Joe's a listener. He watches the live stream. So what are you doing? And I was like, to be very honest with you, I have not the slightest idea what we're doing this Wednesday night. And he was like, well, that's not good. And I was like, sometimes that's kind of how it rolls. And he goes, well, I got a topic for you. I got something that you should do. Something that's been on my mind, something that I've been thinking about, something that I keep seeing on social media. I'm seeing other people discuss. I don't really know exactly how to think about it, or you should expound upon it. And I was like, well, what's the topic? And Joe said, are we in the end times? Like, are we in the last days? Are we there? Like, should we be anticipating the return of Jesus? Because is this where things are at? And I said, that's a great topic. And I think it's completely relevant and worthy of a discussion. So I said, Joe, I need you to come on the show and take Derek's seat and actually introduce. So again, who's Derek? If you're listening on the radio, again, we are live streaming, and part of the live stream is that Creighton is on the radio. So Creighton, welcome again. You interact with me.
Yes, I do.
But in addition to you, who else is here?
We have Nick and we have Derek.
And so they are kind of audience members hanging out, and between the blocks of audio, really kind of off air, we have conversation about what the show's about. And it adds a lot of texture and really sometimes even sets the trajectory for where the show goes over the course of the full hour. Anyway.
And so also sometimes we spend like 15 minutes talking about a thing that somebody has brought up at the very end on the live stream that you would never get on the podcast. There's a
lot of the Outlaw Radio show that if you're just listening on the radio or the podcast that you miss. Conversation before the show begins, between each block of audio, and at the end. Anyway, so Joe asked this question. I was like, hey, you got to come on the show, add kind of put a face behind the name. He was like, I'm not doing that. And I was like, why not, Joe? You need to do that. He goes, I just embarrass all of us. I was like, no, you wouldn't, Joe. He goes, well, let me think and pray about it. I'll get back with you in the morning. I was like, okay, Joe. Hey, Joe. Well, he called me this morning and he was like, hey, I can't do the show. And I was like, Joe. He goes, my daughter is turning 20 today and I had forgotten. And we're having a birthday thing. And I was like, you dog, get out of it.
Excuse.
That's a good excuse. So I'm doing the show about Joe's topic when Joe is supposed to be here. But I really do think that it's relevant. The end times. Are we living in the end times? Is this the last days? And I want to just kind of, I don't want to bury the lead. I want to answer the question very succinctly, very clearly, right from the beginning. Now, we're going to do the whole episode about this. We're going to pack it, but I'm going to answer this question. Are we in the end times? Is this the last days? And the answer is absolutely not. This is not the end times, and we are not living in the last days. Now, I will say I understand why people ask this particular question. Like, I get it. Absolutely understand it. After a year of living through a global pandemic, it's only natural for people to start having questions about kind of apocalyptic, things that you would never have thought possible. Now you can actually kind of play out how they might be probable. Like you can actually see, you read through the book of Revelation, you read about some of these kind of cosmic global issues, and it's hard to imagine a scenario in which any of these things would be possible at all. You understand what I mean, Creighton?
Absolutely.
But after experiencing the last year and watching how, a virus can so quickly spread across the globe, something that starts in Wuhan, China, affects someone in North Dakota,
and shuts the whole globe down,
and can absolutely ravage the entire economy, can bring global trade and travel to a screeching halt, can keep children out of schools for the better part of a year. I mean, when you experience something as big as what we've gone through the last year, it's only natural to start asking yourself questions that you may have never asked before. Now, we're going to kind of build on all of this. We'd love to hear from you, the audience. You can get all of our contact information at outlawradio.org. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. Man, I have so much to talk about, and that was the longest introduction.
That was probably the longest
Ever.
intro
It was.
that I've been a part of.
well, you weren't really a part
And
of
Joe's not
Well,
even here.
And Joe's
That was
not even
Joe's
here.
not even here.
it. The intro might have been longer though if Joe was here.
No, undoubtedly. So just so you guys know, it would be the bit that would cause the Outlaw Radio Show to go viral. Instead of kind of plodding along, slowly developing our audience, if we could incorporate this one bit into our show, I mean, there's no telling. Like the internet might even melt down. And the bit is a 2-minute rant with old Joe.
Yes.
Yes.
You think?
Yes, because if you've ever been at lunch or just in a social setting and you happen to bring up something that in that moment is just the burr in Joe's saddle, you will get 2 minutes of a rant that is glorious. It's eloquent. It's passionate.
He brings in like references. Like he references his rant.
It's the thumbnail. That'd be the
Citations.
thumbnail right
There's
there. Bow,
citations. There's even moments where he just goes off and it's Shakespeare. I mean, like it's Joe. It's like a Joe rant is Dr. Seuss reading Shakespeare.
It's wonderful.
He should have brought his daughter to this.
That would have been a birthday gift.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Samantha, if you do watch, happy birthday, happy 20th. We'd like to wish you a happy birthday.
I do not.
Happy birthday to
That was
you.
creepy. No, we can't do that. We don't have royalty rights for singing the song.
Wait, didn't it go into public domain a couple of years ago?
I think no one can. Anyway,
We're going
his latest so GIF or GIF, Joe has a rant on.
Oh my
Yes,
God.
that's
It's a good
fun.
one.
That one's
Oh,
great.
It's a
wonderful.
good one.
That
It's a
one's
really
great.
good one. His latest one, though, I heard the other night. Have you those? I think they're progressive commercials. Those commercials where it's like, "Don't be your parents."
Yes, love those.
Those commercials. Joe actually has a very interesting perspective, and it's kind of like imagine if they did that commercial, but instead of making fun of old people, they made fun of black people.
Don't be your black friends.
Like
what? Like I don't.
if they made fun of old people using the stereotypes,
Oh,
right?
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't
Like,
work.
how do you like? Joe's like, I'm an old person, and what makes like they're funny, but I relate to a lot of this, and I'm offended. Like you're offending me.
Yeah, no. If they made it and it was like
Asians.
it was like a black dude acting like my great grandmother in
don't be
Central
your
Florida, like that would be that wouldn't.
but because have you noticed? Yeah, like it's ageism again.
Not
It's
a
a
good
great
look.
rant. We need to get Joe. And then I was even thinking like if we could Dave Chappelle skit like our own version of what that type of progressive commercial.
That would be good.
and make it very not progressive.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was terrible. All right,
was
we need to get back to the radio.
Yeah, but what's up with throw pillows? Like, no, I'm with them on the age of like when they're sitting on the couch and he's got all the throw pillows. Like, you don't need these. You don't need these. They're throwing them off. I'm with that. I get it.
The one where he's like, now how many of you know how to open a PDF? And they're all like,
What's a PDF?
Wait,
I don't have silent on my phone.
we all see it. We all see it.
He's got blue hair.
Blue. All right, let's get back to the radio show. 12 minutes.
Yeah, we should probably actually do the thing we came here to do.
12 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I'm joined by Creighton. Creighton, welcome back to the show.
Hello.
So what are we talking about today, Creighton?
We are talking about the end times and that we are not living in them.
Exactly. We're talking about the end times, and there's a lot of people that are curious, that wonder, like, are we approaching the end of days, the apocalypse? Are we living in the last days? And I understand the question. I mean, it's only natural after living through a global pandemic to be asking kind of the existential questions, like these big questions, considering things, that might have been science fiction or fantasy. You can actually now see how some parts of biblical prophecy could play themselves out. Some of the geopolitical unrest that we're seeing recently, Biden came into office promising $2,000 checks, relief package. We don't have a COVID relief package, but we've already bombed Syria, like we got back to bombing countries in the Middle East before we actually followed through with our promises for people suffering, Americans suffering with the pandemic, and China, China being more aggressive, and you're looking at kind of the geopolitical landscape and some of the uncertainty with that, and it gets people thinking and wondering, like, what if we really do get into some type of a conflict with China? I mean, that's World War III caliber stuff. I mean, you don't really walk back from a conflict with China without major cataclysmic upheaval.
Yeah, we're both nuclear powers.
Geopolitical shiftings and whatnot. There is a sense, and I'm going to make fun of my own tribe. Almost every time that you're in an election season, you will always see, like, especially if a Republican is in office and it looks as though a Democrat's going to win. There is always this, like, leading up to the election, the big selling point is you need to go out and vote for the Republican because that Democrat is going to destroy the country.
Obama's the Antichrist.
Right. They're going to destroy our nation, will no longer ever look the way that it looks now. It's doomsday. We will lose our country if the Democrat wins. And you heard a lot of that regarding Joe Biden. And, the only great hope that we have is for Trump to win a second term. And it's kind of nonsense because there's really only one party in Washington. It's Republicans and Democrats. It's just all one party. It's the elites. And it's just, they're shifting, they're taking turns being the captain on the Titanic. Like, it's where we are. And yet, anytime you get, doom and gloom, and then immediately the Democrat becomes president, Biden's now president, you're hearing wall-to-wall coverage of how everything is also falling apart. Like it's no good news, no good coverage. We have an invasion happening on the southern border. We have lost all standing. All of our policies in the Middle East have been reversed. Gasoline has gone up $1, which it has. The Democrat wins, the world is falling apart. And then people start talking about Jesus must be coming back soon. Well, no, that's just the Democrat one. That's not a biblical marker that the return of Christ is imminent.
Yeah, I've heard it said that every generation since Jesus has believed that they were the last generation.
Right. Which is kind of, part of the imminency, the doctrine of that we're all supposed to be living as though we could be. But I understand when you feel like America is in decline, you start again asking these big questions. I think one of the other reasons that this is on the forefront of people's minds, their psyche, is kind of the consolidation of power that we do see taking place, not just in America, but kind of globally. we're in a dynamic where it feels as though the people have less of a say concerning their own destiny than they've ever have. That so much of our freedom, so much of our livelihood, so much of our destiny is being determined by powers outside of our control, whether it's our government, the system. You look at the wealth disparity in American society. It's never been like the divide between the top 1% and the bottom 90%. It's incredible. There is a consolidation of power within tech monopolies and within governmental structures and within the elites consolidating their power. And when people feel helpless, when people don't feel like they have any control anymore, again, you start now asking these big questions. I would also say that the rampant immorality that we see. I mean, there is a truth that we are a nation in moral decline. Within the last few months, just some of the policies that the new administration has enacted dealing with gender and transgenderism and the framing of anyone that doesn't agree with the full celebration of those things. We've got, a potential cabinet member that thinks it's okay for hormone therapies being used and gender reassignment being used on minors. Again, I think no matter where you fall on the issue, at least you should be a consenting adult before you start making radical changes to your biology.
Unchangeable changes.
You look at, again, you just look at the moral situation, and it seems as though society maybe had reached some progress dealing with racism, but now this whole thing has reared its ugly head again, and we have a whole new version of racism taking place within America. Again, it's easy to feel down with where the country is, where things are going. You sense that there is this spirit of Babylon, not to get too preachy or to be too biblical, but there's just this current that's happening, that's sweeping us all up, that we're all at the mercy of. You see Christian hostility. And I think for Christians, you have seen more of a vitriolic presentation of Christian belief, fundamental Christian belief. You have churches that have been shut down under the guise of public health emergency, feeling as though, wait a second, maybe there was another reason that we were shut down, and that it's got something more to do with the secular state that doesn't want the influence of Christianity within our culture. You see how even churches that have reopened are struggling with attendance numbers. Again, my point is that if 2 years ago you had asked me the question, are we in the end times? Are we living in the last days? I would have been like, that is the dumbest question ever. Like what are we talking about? No, we're not. But I sympathize. Like the answer is we're not, but I understand the question. And if you feel that way, if you're thinking that way, if you're curious, like that doesn't make you a tinfoiled hat conspiracy theorist. I think especially Christians, even Christians with a pretty solid biblical understanding, it's only natural to start really struggling and considering and grappling with big issue questions like this. Now, what's important when you're discussing the end times, the last days, is to define what it is we're actually talking about. Creighton, you can see up front how the inability to define what we're discussing leads to confusion as to the topic itself, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a big difference between whether the last days is the tribulation or the time after the tribulation, or pre-rapture, post-rapture, mid-rapture. Like, what exactly does it mean?
So it's important, if we're going to have this discussion, and to deal with the question sincerely, honestly, but with a bit of tenderness, we got to define what the Bible means when we talk about the end times. Like, let's bookend the discussion. So this idea of the end times, the last days, In the Bible, it actually goes by a few other titles that are more like theologically apt or relevant. You have what's called the Day of the Lord, referred to by Jesus, referred to by the Apostle Paul. You have references in the Old Testament. This title, the Day of the Lord, has roots in Old Testament prophecy, is then built upon, taught by Jesus, is expounded upon in the epistles. The Day of the Lord is a very broad term that includes a lot of different events that culminate in the day. In the Hebrew language, day, it has multiple meanings. It can absolutely mean a literal 24-hour period. But it could also mean, day in the sense of like a period of time, the day of the Lord, the moment where things that the Lord is going to bring things to an end, that it's now his time. Years ago, Creighton, when you were in youth group, you guys had a group, a tight-knit group of friends, and you called yourselves the Lost Boys.
Yes, we did.
Okay, we're bringing in the Lost Boys to the Outlaw Radio Show.
That was unexpected.
But almost every summer, you guys actually kind of like gave each summer its own title.
Yes, we had the Summer of Destiny, the Summer of Dreams, and then the Fall of Pan, which is a long story.
So we won't get into all of that. But you would say, like, these were the days of fill in the blank. It
was the day of the Lost Boys.
It was a period of time that was your heyday, and it had a theme to it. When we talk about the Day of the Lord regarding biblical prophecy, we're referring to a period of time in which all of the Old Testament prophecy dealing with Jesus reaches a culmination, a conclusion, a finality. The end times, the last days, the Day of the Lord. There's a few other titles. I'm reaching a hard break. Again, let me reiterate our desire to hear from you, the listening audience. The easiest way to contact us is by email, info@outlawradio.org, info@outlawradio.org. If you're listening on the radio, check out our podcast, available on Apple, Google, Spotify. If you're listening on the podcast or the radio, 8 o'clock Wednesday nights at outlawradio.live. We live stream the recording of the Outlaw Radio Show. You can also find the stream at facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
We just actually had a mini Lost Boys reunion last weekend. It was a good time.
You and Matt and Daniel?
Yep. All got together and hung out at Matt's house downtown. It was a good time. I hadn't seen Daniel in like a year and a half.
That's great. I was grappling for an illustration, try to illustrate the idea of a day, and looking at you, that came to mind. So, yeah, you caught you off guard because I caught myself off guard.
Yeah, I mean, I was not expecting a Lost Boys reference on Outlaw Radio.
Nick, Dill Daddy, y'all got anything?
I get from the perspective of thinking we're in the end times because of just like the flagrant open sexuality that there is. Like there's a preached tolerance of everything now. Like you need to be acceptance of my so-and-so gender or whatever I identify as. And if you look to Romans where he talked about like, all right, well, God gave them up to their sexuality and to the things that they wanted to do and gave them up to that. And that was like that was the end. Like that was their demise. Like he was just like, all right, y'all want to do this? Here you go. My wrath has come in later. I got you, dog.
The challenge about just looking at, because I relate to that. I completely understand that. Yeah. And that's a wonderful point. The challenge just looking at the moral fabric as your litmus test for where we are regarding the end times is that, yes, we see a moral depravity in our world right now, but let's not kid ourselves that this is a new type of moral depravity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go back and study ancient cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of depravity of ancient Egypt or the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the ancient Israelis and the Canaanite worship of Baal and Molech, sacrificing actual living children. And then you fast forward to the Grecian Empire and and Rome, and you start talking about, well, sexuality.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, you look back, at Rome, and not only was, homosexuality rampant, pedophilia rampant. I mean, you had all types of incest, and it was normalized. Now, what makes America a little unique is that we're the first country to actually stamp the label of marriage on homosexuality.
Yeah.
That's a new thing in the history of the world. But you look back, and again, you get outside of maybe the chart of Western empires. The Chinese were brutal. The Ming Dynasty, the Mongols, Imperial Japan. You didn't look at Nazi Germany and Russia. I mean, sinful humanity, there knows no depths to his depravity.
Yeah. I think it's just the fact that we have social media now too. It connects you. I can instantly connect to another part of the country
or
where
world.
like all this stuff that this has been going on for centuries and generations. Like this has been going on for forever, but it's the fact now that okay, now it's all connected. Maybe now it just seems like there's so much more, but really it was there the whole time, but now we're just more aware and connected to everything and to all of it. So it was there, it was already there, but now I can just see it. I can see it.
And I think seeing it amplifies it.
For sure.
Absolutely.
There's some studies that have been done about the effect the normalization of homosexuality has had on a younger society. They want to tell you that culture doesn't play a role in whether someone's gay or not. The problem is that we actually have data that seems to indicate that culture does play a role on how people perceive sexuality and even their own sexuality. We're starting to see certain data about bisexuality or transgenderism, and going on the point that you made, the interconnectedness, it amplifies it. I think cultural trends are not created by social media, but they are sped up exponentially through social media.
Like a market saturation.
It is, yeah. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
For sure. A market saturation is a good way to say it. Nick, you got anything?
You're going to probably dive into my points, because I was just going to say we just have to look at Revelation. We have to look at other passages in the Bible to see what describes end times to really get a gist of it.
Well, we'll get there.
I know.
Keep chewing, keep thinking. When we come back, dive on in. So next block of audio is 11 minutes. 11 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I am joined by Creighton. Creighton, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the end times.
And at the end of the last segment, the point that I was making is at the end times, we have to define that term.
Right. It can mean a lot of different things to different people who are talking about different contexts. So obviously we're addressing things. We're having a discussion from a Christian worldview. So if you hear the title, are we in the end times? Are we in the last days? Where's the best place to go to try to define the term that we're discussing? Daniel.
Or the
Revelation.
Bible. We go to the Bible. We go to God's word. And all throughout Scripture, the end times, last days, it's known by several other titles. In the previous block, we noted how it was referred to as the day of the Lord, a very broad term. The day of the Lord, speaking of just kind of a period of time. Yes, there is a literal day of the Lord, probably what we would call a lowercase d, which you would say is the second coming of Jesus. It is his day. But more broadly speaking, beyond the 24-hour period, more figuratively, there is a season in which God directly brings about the finality of prophecy related to Jesus, the Messiah, and his handling with humanity. And another title for this idea is Daniel's 70th week, which kind of comes across a little bit more technical. You'd have to do a deep dive into Daniel chapter 9 to understand this, but basically Daniel was given a vision by God in which God had determined that he was going to wrap up his dealings with the Jewish people in a period of 490 years. And within the prophecy, there are certain markers where these 490 years would begin. And we're also told what would happen at the 483rd year. It would begin with the decree of Xerxes to allow the Hebrew people to return, rebuild the streets, even in troublesome times. At the 483rd year mark, so 69 of these 70 weeks, Messiah the Prince would present himself and be cut off. Speaking of the death, the triumphal entry of Jesus and his death, and the tragedy therein, his crucifixion. But then we're given the beginning of this 70th week, this final period of 7 years, which begins with the signing of a false peace between a man we're introduced to as the Antichrist, and that will culminate with the second coming of Jesus. And so Daniel's 70th week, while 483 years of God's prophetic handling of the people of Israel have been fulfilled, there is still a 7-year period of time in which there are several things that God intends to complete. That's where we get the idea of a 7-year period of, and here's the next title, Great Tribulation. Jesus spoke of Great Tribulation. The Olivet Discourse in Matthew chapter 24, he spoke about Great Tribulation, a period again of 7 years that begins with the signing of a false peace between the Antichrist and many nations, including Israel. A 7-year period that ends with the second coming of Jesus Christ physically to this earth, a period in which the 3.5-year mark has a very notable event spoken of frequently in Scripture known as the abomination of desolation, when this Antichrist goes into a rebuilt Jewish temple and desecrates it, makes it, he commits an abominable act that causes desolation when he declares himself to be God. Great Tribulation. So the idea of end times, the last days, biblically being the day of the Lord, Daniel's 70th week, being a period of 7 years of Great Tribulation. It's with that context in mind, it's with that definition in mind, why I would definitively say that we are not in the end times, nor are we in the last days under that definition. And that makes sense, right, Creighton?
Right, because we believe that there's a very specific thing that starts that off.
There's not just a very specific thing that starts that off, but you can also make the argument that, okay, if the end times begins with the first seal judgment, the unveiling of the Antichrist, the signing of this false peace consistent with Daniel chapter 9. What needs to happen before that? And I think that the case can be made biblically, scripturally, that there are two things that have to happen before we even get to the end times, which is why I can definitively say we're not in the last days, because there's still some things on God's prophetic timeline that need to happen before the unveiling, the revealing of the Antichrist takes place, initiating what we would then call the last days. You have the rapture of the church. Again, this is not going to be an episode in which I just build all of the arguments for a pre-tribulational view of the rapture, other than the fact that the Apostle Paul is very specific. He's very clear that the one thing that is restraining the unveiling of the son of perdition, this Antichrist, this final world ruler that presents himself as an instead of Jesus Christ, is the working of the Holy Spirit in the church. And that it's once as Jesus would say, the times of the Gentiles come to a completion, that the age of the church reaches its finality, that the church is then removed. The removing of the church now, the Holy Spirit, what's restraining, paves the way for the unveiling of the Antichrist. And so when you're looking at these things, it's like, well, I need an Antichrist for us to be in the last days. But in order for there to be an Antichrist, the thing restraining his unveiling needs to be removed. That has to happen, which is the rapture of the church. Now, what's fascinating, dealing with the imminency of the rapture, is that there's no reason, there's no indication that the two have to happen like simultaneously, like that the rapture of the church happens and ba-boom, ba-ba, there's the Antichrist. Like it could be 40 years between the rapture of the church and the unveiling of the Antichrist. I don't think so, but the rapture can happen at any point. It's not predicated upon anything else happening. But what we can say is that we should not even be having the conversation, are we in the last days, until the rapture of the church happens. And if you're left behind to see that, then it becomes a very real topic of conversation, because the world is thrown into a bit of chaos and turmoil. You're going to see from the chaos a global leader emerge to create order. And the prophetic timeline of Daniel's 70th week will be initiated. I think the case can also be made that the events recorded in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So Ezekiel 38 and 39 record an event, a prophetic event, in which a world power north of Israel, Gog and Magog, as it's referred to, with a coalition of 10 nations, launched a preemptive strike on the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel is overwhelmed. There's little hope of survival. They're caught off guard. The armies that are attacking them outnumber them greatly. It's going to be a lopsided victory. The Jews are on their heels. They don't know what to do. They're desperate. And against all of the incredible odds, against all of these insurmountable odds, God divinely intervenes and crushes these armies. A bloodbath ensues, and the Jewish people emerge victorious. So much so, like, the supernatural element is so overt that even the Jewish people, who today are very secular, will recognize the divine hand because it was so amazing, improbable. Now, as you unpack this particular prophecy, there doesn't seem to be any type of historical fulfillment as of today. Gog and Magog being early derivatives of Moscow, of the people groups that populated the region that's now Russia. You look through the list of nations, this 10-nation coalition, this federation, that are all Muslim nations that are mostly filled with hatred towards the Israeli people. Countries like Iran, which would have been Persia, Turkey, Lebanon, etc. It's interesting to note the countries not included in this coalition of nations. Iraq, Babylon, not mentioned. The Gulf Arab states, also not mentioned. Notable as of recent political events where the Gulf nations have started one by one recognizing and building diplomatic relations with Israel. Anyway, this prophecy seems to present Russia and this coalition of Muslim nations attacking Israel. Doesn't seem to have any type of fulfillment within history, nor does it seem to have, when you study the end times, the last days, any type of actual specific fulfillment within those 7 years. There will be wars, there will be conflict, but we don't seem to have specific correlations between Ezekiel 38 and 39 and would just say the book of Revelation, meaning that for us to get into the last days, for us to approach the end times, not only would the rapture of the church need to have happened, but this particular conflict would have also ensued. Now, whether or not that conflict happens before or after the rapture of the church, we're not aware. We're not sure. I tend to gravitate towards it likely happening after the rapture. The rapture of the church would decimate America. The one thing prohibiting any type of an attack on Israel would be America's support and backing. They are our ally. That being said, progressive liberal administrations haven't seemed to really rally behind Israel. So there's a lot of scenarios in which this can play. But again, defining the term the end times, explaining what needs to happen before the end times, tells us definitively that we can't possibly be in the last days. Don't go anywhere. We'll conclude these thoughts. I feel like I'm throwing out a lot of
you are
solid theology.
So
it helps that I'm teaching this stuff.
Yeah,
this stuff
you're
presently.
teaching it right now. So
Well, I just
stuff
did-
is just coming to mind.
I did
all the
Daniel,
time.
so I was immersed in Daniel, and then logically went to the book of Revelation. So
Are we going to go to Ezekiel next?
no,
Oh, you weren't there.
We're doing the Song of Solomon
he was
next.
No, he wasn't teaching.
We're gonna do the revelation of the king to the love of the king.
Wait, are you serious?
I'm dead
That's
serious.
dead serious. Yeah.
You're going to do Song of Solomon.
Yeah, the love of the king. The king's
That's
the king's,
okay,
the
I would
king's
like-
love.
transition, but it's
I would
good.
like a public apology because I made that suggestion one book ago
You did.
and you laughed at me from the pulpit.
That was
Well,
like
because it wouldn't have
pre-Daniel,
worked
wasn't it?
after Daniel.
Yeah.
Song of Solomon, though, happens to be the most logical place to go after the book of Revelation.
That is
because you go from the revelation of the king
To the love of the king.
to the love of the
It's
king.
cool.
I mean, I'm totally down.
You look at
it's
the love of the king for his bride.
this is one of those times where at some point I'm going to be talking to somebody and they're going to be like, so I'll be like, I was at church and be like, what do you be studying? I was like, oh, we're doing Song of Solomon. And one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to
Oh.
say, what is Song of Solomon?
Yeah.
Or they're going to go, like on a Sunday
Really?
morning,
Like at
what are you guys doing?
Like at church, y'all are doing.
And then I'd be like,
songs?
yeah, we just did Revelation and like Leviticus a little while before that. And Genesis a little while before that.
Daniel.
And it's
before
like,
that,
welcome to Calvary Life.
Welcome to Calvary 316, the church that studies all of the books you've never heard of.
Yeah. Hey, we go all in though.
No, we do.
We
Thank
go
you.
all in.
Bill Daddy, Bill
Verse
on
by
that.
verse.
No, absolutely. That's why I said one thing from the beginning. I mean, I've grown up in the church my whole life pretty much, but the one thing I've appreciated here is like the in-depth studies. Like, I mean, you as a pastor are very blessed and I'm thankful for that, but I'm thankful for the studies that we do. I mean, we go all in.
We go all in.
Verse by verse, baby.
I'm not sure going deep is something that we are going to be able to say about the Song of Solomon.
Well,
I was trying not to make that joke.
We're going to have to be
He made
very
it for you.
careful
Hey, man.
the way that we frame certain things.
Phrasing.
Phrasing will
Phrasing
be
will
very,
be very
important.
important.
It's the king and the bride. We're going deep. We're going there.
We are.
It's all right.
Oh, brother, it's
I'm
already
pumped.
started. We haven't even got there. So hey, I do have one block of audio left. So should I just do that and then we'll get into this?
Yeah.
Or Nick, you have anything real quick?
I was going to say the only logical question after what you just explained to where we're at and we're not in it is most people are just going to ask you after that, then how close are we coming to the rapture?
Perfect setup. Let's do that.
Closer and closer every day.
Every second.
Every second of every day we
Yeah.
get closer. No, that's a great segue because that is the last block.
Yep, I figured. I just
Man,
wanted
it's
to- I
like-
wanted to build you up.
It's like you're in my head. That's a dangerous place to be. Anyway,
yeah, we're
you-
going to the Song of Solomon.
a lot of room up there.
9. Oh, I see what you did. I see what you did. All right, 9:45. 3, 2, 1. Creighton, welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back.
So we've been talking about the end times, the last days, and the simple answer to the question, are we living in the last days, is no, not at all. We can't be. Again, if you define what the end times mean by looking at scripture, there are a couple of things that have to happen before you even get to the end times. The rapture of the church, Ezekiel 38 and 39, certain things have to happen to set the stage for the unveiling of the Antichrist, which is a central figure regarding end times prophecy. So the short end of the answer is no, we're not living in the end times, nor are we living in the last days. But then the next question, the question that kind of emerges is, are there any signs that we can see that we're getting closer? Now, Creighton, you've been around me long enough. Like my big pet peeve, and you even mentioned it right before we went back on air about the end times, is that this is what statement?
We are closer today than we were tomorrow to the return of Jesus.
And it's
Or
like
some version of that.
it's like, duh, of course we are. And
That's
wait a
how
second,
time works.
wait a second, we're closer now, and we're closer now. Like
We're closer now than when we started the show.
we are closer to the rapture of the church right now than when we recorded the show. So are there any ways though that we can, like, any signs, like if you're reading the tea leaves, if you're looking at the weather pattern, like, are these things brewing? Are there indicators? Now I need to say up front that it's very difficult to be dogmatic at all. Again, you can talk about the moral fabric of a country. Like, is there a scenario where God judges America for her immorality, and that doesn't put us any closer to the end times but America gets judged? Absolutely. Like there's a scenario. And the same way that God has judged kind of all empires that strayed, that became more depraved. I think one of the great blessings, the reason that America has been blessed is that God did say that he would bless those that blessed his people, Israel, and he would curse those who cursed his people. And I think one of the reasons that America has experienced great blessing, prosperity, is our support of the nation state of Israel. That being said, we were blessed before Israel even existed, and that had a lot to do with our Judeo-Christian ethic, our worldview, and the influence that Christians in America were having through missionary endeavors across the planet. Now, as we stray from that, as America becomes more and more secular, I think that there's a scenario in which America can be judged, and that doesn't put us any closer to the end times, though, like, there's an apocalyptic thing that happens to us. So I want to be careful in saying this, but are there tea leaves? Are there things that say, man, there's not a whole lot left? Now, when you look at the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 1, this is the revelation of Jesus Christ, things that must shortly take place. And the idea must shortly is that the closer you get, the more signs you'll see. And within the chronology of world affairs, since that statement has been made, there is no question that we do see more and more, a more frequency of indicators today than, let's say, we did 200 years ago or 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, which is an indicator. It is a sign that you're getting closer to the destination. The closer you travel from Athens to Atlanta, you know you're getting closer to Atlanta when you see more and more signs, indicators saying you're closer to Atlanta. The further away you are, the less signs you see. One sign in particular that we can point to was the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Jesus prophetically pointed to the budding of the fig tree. The fig tree that had been cursed. The fig tree always represented the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel had been cursed. God cursed her. Jesus cursed her. She was destroyed and disappeared from the planet for roughly 1,800 years. And yet Jesus said the generation that sees the budding of the fig tree, like that's a sign, like that's a big one. And Israel reemerged from the ashes, in May of 48. So what then does it mean, the generation that sees that? And in the Bible, again, the way it defines generation is all over the place. A generation could be 40 years, which is why a lot of people are saying Jesus was going to return in 1948, which means the rapture had to happen in 81 because of 7-year tribulation, because a generation was 40 years. But then we started redefining and started looking at, well, the Bible also says that generations are other. You can get to a point where the generation is 100 years. It's hard to pinpoint it, other than the fact to say that the rebirth of Israel is definitely an indicator that prophetically something is happening that's significant. Again, the nation of Israel rises from the ashes. The dry bones take on flesh. That's an important development prophetically, which tells us that there are rumblings. Now, again, it's been, it's almost 70 years. So what's the time frame? What does that mean? And you can't say. I would also note, so it's interesting. So I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. So I'm listening to guys that have taught through the book of Revelation, specifically 2 guys that taught in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006. And it's just funny to listen to the way that they connect so many geopolitical dots to, I heard one guy talk about that NAFTA, that this whole idea of the blending together of Canada, America, and Mexico, the erosion of borders, that it was one of the 10 regions of the kingdoms of the book of Revelation, and how the whole plan was to get rid of the dollar and us have our own version of the euro. And it's like, well, now looking back, that's kind of dumb. Like, it is true though. You just look at our world. We are more connected than ever before. If you go back to the Babel, one language, humanity was able to communicate in one voice. The internet has made that possible. We do communicate in one voice. It is zeros and ones. We have a universal language, and it's, again, binary. It's code. we see global alignments. And no doubt a lot of this is kind of, Donald Trump and his America First agenda and this kind of conservative nationalism really kind of pumped the brakes on America's involvement in globalism and therefore the global order. The immediate thing that has been reversed since Biden became elected is we have gotten back into this globalist mentality, normalization of relations with China. We'll see if the TPP comes back. The re-entering of the climate Paris Accords, trying to get back into this agreement with Iran. We see geopolitical realignments. The WHO, the World Health Organization, our role, the Human Rights Council in the United Nations, globalism. And I will say this, and we're running out of time. Another indicator, and I think this is a big one, is one of the churches that Jesus addresses that does lead up to the tribulational period is the lukewarm church. And if you're going to say that there was one big characteristic of the church today, unique in history, is that the church is absolutely lukewarm. Seeker-friendlyism, the attractional church model, again, I think sets the stage for a lukewarm, the church of Laodicea. And that's an indicator to me because we know that church reaches the end. Creighton, you have anything to say with 15 seconds that we have left?
I think it's important to add that even if Jesus doesn't come for another legitimate millennia, we're still called to live every day like he's coming tomorrow.
Absolutely. And be serious and not escapist, but be serious about our calling. Our mission is the same.
Yeah.
We
what
watch.
Do you say you only take two things to heaven: your memories and the friends that you bring to Christ.
And the friends that you bring to Christ. I will add, and then we're going to close, is that the environment in which the rapture of the church happens is an environment of world peace. It's an environment of prosperity. Anyway, Creighton, thanks for being with us.
It is always a pleasure.
Well, once again, thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening. Check out outlawradio.org, all of our contact information, social media. My name is Zach Adams, and I do hope that you join me this time next week for more of the Outlaw Radio Show. All right.
I was just waiting to see how long that dead air would last.
All right, Nick.
I was the one who usually
Nick,
cut the
jump
mics
in.
off.
Jump in. I feel like you brought it home really well. I feel like the point, if you answer the question, where are the end times? It's the rapture of church or wherever, that the next logical question is, okay, how close is that? Well, every day we're getting closer. And there are signs. I see them. Especially with this new president and going global. That was the biggest thing that really hit me. You get focused on what all the other people are doing too. And churches now, I don't even know.
Yeah,
We got Derek's dirty shoes all over the
Buddhist, baby. Hard-working Buddhist.
Man, hard working.
But
we're a blue-collar show here with the Outlaw Radio
No,
Show.
this is a great collar. So, but I think
we're a blue collar show.
Yeah.
You're clergy.
Clergy. I think it's really easy to get caught up in all of the commotion and all the stuff going on and be like, oh wow, this is crazy, like this might be the end times, when in reality, like you said earlier, we're called to just live the lives that we're supposed to live. We're called to live as Christ would want to live, and we're called to minister to the people around us. When, at the end of the day, I can sit here every single day, all day, and just be like, oh, is this it? Like, we're getting closer and closer. We're getting closer. He's coming back. And that, I feel like that kind of pulls away from the focus of no, we're still supposed to be called to live our own life and do our own thing and minister and bring people to him instead of worrying about when he's going to come back.
See, you got to realize that the doctrine of the rapture, and this is what so many people get wrong, the doctrine of the rapture has nothing to do with stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
The doctrine of the rapture was about motivation. The idea that Jesus could come at any moment, it's to motivate me that this could be it. This could be my last day. This could be the final opportunity. My king is going to call me home, and that could happen today. And that adds an urgency. It adds urgency. It also adds a weight of importance for the moment in which you're in. It's not like, without the rapture, it's like, well, I can get to this later. I can get to this next week. I can have that conversation with this person at a more convenient time.
Yeah, you never know.
When it's like, I have no idea if I have tomorrow. Now, of course, no one's guaranteed tomorrow because life is but a vapor. That being said, for the Christian, again, the rapture, the idea of watching isn't stagnation. It's not me to stop doing what I'm supposed to be doing and look up. It's the motivation for me to get busy with what I'm supposed to do. I dug myself a hole last week, saying some certain things about my beautiful wife and athleticism. I'm gonna dig it. I'm gonna dig another one.
Oh gosh.
Oh, no.
That's what I love about you, Zach. You double down when you're wrong.
Thank you, Creighton. Appreciate that.
Only on things that don't actually matter.
So
like family and.
So when Jess leaves me with the kids, so let's say it's like a Saturday and she wants to run to the grocery store and stop by Target and get some errands done. She wants to get out of the house, wants a break from the kids, wants to get out. And I'm right there. Like, I completely understand. No problem. Saturday's my lazy day. I'll bum around with the kids. No problem. But if Jessica ever leaves me with instructions of things that she wants me to get done before she gets back with the kids, like I want their rooms made. I want them to have showers. They need to eat lunch. None of that happens when she leaves. But the closer and closer we feel like she could be back at any moment, the more we start running around getting it all done. And what's great is that, like, I can pull it up on my phone and be like, she has left Target. Go! And the kids run and we got to get it done. But it's that idea, like when you're anticipating they could be here at any minute, like you want to get moving. Like there's incentive. And if you see yourself as a servant of the Most High, I'm an ambassador of Christ. Like I'm like Jesus, the moment we get saved, he could call us home. So, but he hasn't. So why? Well, because there's a purpose in our redemption. And that is to reach the lost, to let them know that they can be saved as well. So again, when you really understand the idea of the rapture, it's not about escaping this rock. It's about reaching people on this rock. It should motivate and not stagnate. Y'all have any other thoughts? We have any comments? Anything else?
Comments are dead tonight.
Comments are dead tonight.
Wow.
It was a beautiful day today. Maybe everyone's out playing in the sunshine.
It got cold tonight.
Yeah, Moonbird.
It got real cold tonight. It's cold right now.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it got cold.
All right.
Nick, you got anything else?
I think I'm good.
All right. Well, we're going to start slowly rolling in some tunes. You guys say goodbye.
Good
Bye,
night,
everyone.
everyone. Good night.
Thank you so much for watching the Outlaw Radio Show. Next Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Hope to see you.